kill someone, take me! Michael! I want to take his mask off and see the life leave his eyes.
Hey guys, welcome back to Pop Culture with Pat. So, very excited to have one of my favorite guests back on the show, James Jude Courtney. You guys know him. He is the Shape, aka Michael Myers. Played Michael Myers in Halloween 18. He's in Halloween Kills, and he's going to be Michael Myers once again in Halloween Ends. Thanks again, James, for coming back on the show.
Pat, great to see you, man.
Thank you. Yeah, and hey, just to start things off, I want to congratulate you too. #1 movie with Halloween Kills, again. I mean, that must feel great, back-to-back films with Halloween both hitting, #1 coming out that first week.
It does, man. I mean, and it's kind of magical, and it's so magical that like Andy and I have talked about it a lot, and Nick, Nick and I were spending a lot of time together talking about the whole path of all the Halloween films, and Jamie and I actually had agreed not to talk until we do Halloween Ends, till we finish Halloween Ends, because we're keeping this distance and tension between us. But she called me before she went to the Venice Film Festival, and we just had this 45-minute, hour-long conversation about. I mean, she was very complimentary of myself, which was very sweet. But more we talked about just the magic of everybody who's come together on this. David Gordon Green and Danny McBride, and just the amazing Michael Simmons, the cinematographer, and Heath Hood, the special effects guy, Chris Nelson, special effects makeup. I mean, all these amazing, talented people who came together, and we knew when we were making Kills, we had what we had in 2018. We were actually terming it 2018 on steroids.
Yeah, no, and I mean, after finally after getting to see the film, we had it, had it delayed too, which it's like obviously just drove out the anticipation even more. But I mean, it was for myself, and I know a lot of people felt safer watching it from home on HBO Max and stuff like that. But it was a movie for me. It was no question that I had to see it on the big screen, and I went with some friends and stuff like that. And to me, that was just the ultimate experience, seeing a movie on this level with just everything that was going on, seeing it on the big screen. So yeah, again, congratulations to you and just the rest of the crew as well.
Yeah, and thank you for that, and thank you for saying the crew. I mean, literally every single person who worked on it, craft service, the Teamsters who drove the trucks, the wardrobe, Emily and her crew. I mean, every single department was there because we wanted to be. Everybody had a passion for this project. And, I mean, we're all lucky to be in the movies anyhow, but we knew we had something special. Everybody worked extra hard, and everybody deserves a pat on the back for what they've done.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, there's a lot that goes into just making any movie. So I mean, everyone definitely I feels deserves their kudos. So, and to start, kind of start things off, James. So to open things up, kind of how the movie opens up itself, I wanted to ask you about. So it pretty much it picks right up where. And by the way, guys, if you don't already know or already realize, this interview is going to have spoilers in it. So if you have not seen the film, just a heads up, because we're going to get into spoilers here. So if you haven't seen it, watch the movie, come back. Or if you don't care about spoilers, you can watch this and watch the movie as well. But basically, the film, it picks right up where 18, ends, where, you see that the house is on fire, they're leaving. I needed to ask you about just that whole sequence of, Michael Myers escaping from the house, you taking on the firefighters, because I imagine obviously a lot, went into that scene. Can you just kind of break that down a little bit?
Yeah. Well, clearly at the end, we shot all the fire gags at the end, just like we did in 2018, primarily because it's so dangerous. Had they lost me to, third-degree burns, and I ended up in a hospital for a week or a month or months, they wouldn't have been able to finish the film. So we saved the fire stuff for the very, very last. And dude, it was intense. It was intense. It was just as intense as 2018, only more intense because we had so much more to do. For instance, fighting down in the flames when I come up out of the gun closet, the camera people and the firefighters and safety and everybody all had their fire gear on and their masks and the oxygen. I didn't. I mean, I had no mech suit on. I was protected, but I was breathing all that, all that, and exerting myself, like tremendously exerting myself.
Yeah.
And then walking through the house, it was so intense that I couldn't breathe and I couldn't have my eyes open. So what I had to do was count the steps from the back of the house to the front of the house. And then once I got the front door and I knew by how many steps I'd walked, I felt a wave of heat from the porch that was different from the wave of heat that was hitting me in the house. At that point, I still had to count the steps to the edge of the porch so I didn't fall down the stairs. But I could, at the edge of the stairs, I could creak my eyes and begin to look, and then I could open up and then I could start breathing. And at that point, I also felt the wave of heat go over my head, and it was licking so close that, the producers and safety people were really concerned because, that even though I had a Nomex hood on, that's not going to protect you from, that intensity of flame. The fighting we did with the firefighters, who, by the way, are just insanely talented stuntmen, and and especially in critical situations like that, the blocking has to be so tight. Aaron Armstrong did a brilliant job of stunt coordinating. The guys he brought in were top notch. We it was so critical because we're fighting ankle deep in mud because of all the water being thrown at us. Yeah. So slipping, sliding, holding your grip. The Halligans are not light, dude. They're very heavy. So is the jaws of life. So is the saw. So incredibly intense. And the safety people did their job. I will say there's one point where they're hitting me with the hose.
Yep.
Those hoses are high pressure, as we all know from watching tragic films of hoses being used on human beings in situations they shouldn't have been. And the first couple takes, the firefighter who was manning the hose hit me a little bit below the belt, shall we say. And it hurt. It hurt. Nothing intentional, but it was all good. We nailed it. And yeah, it was fun stuff though, man.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it in like the trailer, but again, seeing it just like on the big screen, that whole thing playing out, I knew obviously a lot had to go into that, because we had talked about previously on 18 when you were down, in the house and all the flames were around you and everything, and just that level of concentration. So definitely something, I wanted to, to talk to you about for sure. So thank you for that. Now, I would say arguably here in Halloween Kills, Michael Myers, like, this is the most brutal that he's ever been, in the franchise. Like, you could put up against like Rob Zombie's, like, Michael Myers, like, as well. But here he's just, on like a next level. So did your approach to the character, did it change at all going into this film? Just like having that level of, the violence, the brutal kills and everything?
No, not at all. It basically was, I showed up in the same spiritual place I was when I showed up on the first day of 2018. I'd already grabbed what Nick Castle created in 1978. I'd already incorporated my being, allowed that to drive how I moved as the character, what my motivation was as the character. So basically, that is so ingrained in me. It's so locked into me that when I showed up, all it was a matter of knowing the parameters of the sandbox. You know what I mean? So that's David Gordon Green and and the stunt coordinator and Simmons and the camera operators. So I have these parameters within which I have to work, and that's technical. That's just a matter of having done this long enough and understanding the craft of filmmaking, and then holding the soul of that character while I do the work. So nothing changed. It was the exact same internally for me, even though physically it was more violent, physically it was more demanding. And I took a beating. I mean, it took a couple months for me to heal from it, bruised ribs and, hematoma and, my bruised shoulder and, all those fun things that happen when you make a fun film like that. I mean, I live for that stuff. So, that's all good. but yeah, it's really and I will be in that exact same spiritual position when I show up in January to shoot Halloween Ends. I it's in me, it exists in me. I don't intellectualize this character, so, and I won't until I'm done. Then I'll look back at it, and maybe then I'll assess what it is I did or why I did what I did.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And speaking of like the previous film, like 78 and even like Halloween 18. You got to work with Nick Castle on that film, and you guys shared a scene specifically for Halloween Kills. Was there any scene in this film that you guys got to share again, like in this film as well?
No. It was beautiful in 2018 because we had hoped for the passing of the torch, the passing of the baton. And we were hoping, we didn't know what David was going to do, and we didn't ask him. And it turned out that we did get to have that same scene where he was in the window when Laurie Strode pulls up, but when she shoots, it's me in the mirror. So we inhabit the same scene. So that really was metaphorically a passing of the torch, or for me to carry forth the shape. He's not in Halloween Kills physically. He's not in any one of the scenes, but spiritually he is, because when I'm stalking and you hear the breathing, that's Nick breathing. So I think it's really poetic that Nick is the breath of the shape, because he breathed life into the shape in 1978, and that to me is it's beautiful. I mean, so, but yeah, it's all me. There's one scene where I'm doubled, and that's Douglas Tate came in, and they did it mostly for safety. They wanted a double there in case there was injury or a risk of injury. And there's one scene where, I'm on a Suburban. All the stuff I do on the Suburban is me, but getting up on the Suburban and jumping off, they used Doug for a very good reason, because if I had, that was like in the middle of shooting, had I sprained an ankle or a knee or, tweaked my low back or something, I would not be able to move the way I move. And sure enough, Doug jumped off the Suburban, and there were dolly tracks running along the, for the camera running along the Suburban. Yep. He jumped off and sprained his ankle, and that would have been me. So Doug Tate came in for one scene to double me, and he did his job, and he took it like a champ, took one for the team. But other than that, it's all me, 100% me.
And that's obviously, yeah, it's a good reason, because yeah, you can't lose, your Michael Myers, in this film. If you got injured and then you couldn't, like you said, exactly, if you couldn't move the exact same way, what are you going to do? It's like, then you either have to wait, which you can't really do like in the film business, unless we have like some crazy circumstances happen, things got to keep moving. So that's completely understandable, but that's cool. So pretty much Halloween Kills, this was your movie as the, the shape, like fully.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, they both are 2018 and Kills. Because Nick came in for one scene, and then in this one, I think the difference is that this one was more, I've established this character, like I'm established as this character. I still get questions about, and I think there's a whole lot of misinformation out there. I think that started in 2018, and I think it's still been propagated, for during Kills. On the internet, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I get people coming up going, so like, which scene were you in, and which one was Nick in? And Nick, look, man, you gotta look at his filmography. Look, he's a director, writer. I mean, that man has made some amazing films. I mean, the man is so talented. We are very good friends. I mean, the kind of friends that talk often on the phone or shoot each other, like busting each other's chops on texts and things. Yeah. We're very, very good friends. And Nick doesn't want to take credit for something he didn't do. And I honor that. And we never even talked about the character. Like, we have never once talked about this character, which, is really kind of interesting, considering he originated it and I've assumed it. But I imagine if he were directing, we wouldn't talk about it. In fact, David Green and I haven't talked about the character. One time we talked about it in 2018. After that, no conversation.
Wow. So let the record be straight, James Jude Courtney. He is your Michael Myers for Halloween 2018. Halloween Kills, you're going to be the shape again, like I said once in the beginning, that you're going to be Halloween Ends. So, and this is the first time, you know, that we've had someone assume the role of Michael Myers, like in like multiple films too, which is, you know, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's I think Don Shanks did what was it, 5 and 7? I can't remember.
Yeah,
But
but at
yeah,
least 3 times.
and Tyler Mane did too. But yeah, 3 times, man. But it makes sense because, you know, and trust me, David Gordon Green and Danny McBride have something up their sleeve. I mean, there's going to be an arc with this trilogy, and so it made sense that Halloween Kills would be far more brutal and than 2018. And so you got to, I mean, David Gordon Green and Danny McBride especially just have this insanely acute sense of feeding into the subconscious of their audience. So where we go with Halloween Ends is going to be, it's going to be fun, man.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see that. I can't, you know, and hopefully this time, you know, we get the film initially once, you know, once that release date is set, we get to see it, you know, it comes out and don't have to worry about any kind of pushbacks or anything like that for Ends. Something else I wanted to ask you about was throughout the Halloween franchise, you know, Michael Myers, he almost carries himself as like an artist to a degree because of just the way that you know, after he kills one of his victims, like a lot of times he'll pose the bodies or whatever for someone else to find them. And I know, I believe you, well, you did it in 18, but also like in this film, the scene that sticks out specifically to me because we actually get to see you kind of in the action of doing this is when you stab the one guy in the house where you stab him multiple times with the knife and you just fill his back up with like, you know, like 10 knives or something like that. And he's laying there. So was it important for you guys to keep that element, you know, in this trilogy, you know, because where it was a big part of the rest of the Halloween franchise? And in your opinion, why do you think Michael does this?
Well, the last part of that question I will answer for you after we do Halloween Ends and I actually look at it intellectually.
Yeah.
I think, you know, what I can really pivot all this to is the ability of David Gordon Green and Danny McBride to take what John Carpenter created. And John Carpenter has a wicked sense of humor. Right? He has a wicked sense of humor. So, and he's a prankster. I mean, you know, and so what he created in 1978, it makes perfect sense that Danny and David would tap into the, you know, the undercurrents, the, you know, the lava flow beneath the surface of what he does and why he does it and how funny he is, and the beautiful artistry of who John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, you know, Deborah Hill was and John Carpenter still is. And so I think everything that David and Danny have done is sort of an homage in a way to John Carpenter, and then it's also in complete respect for the fans. I mean, for the movie-going audience that hasn't seen 78 and they're not big fans of horror, or maybe they're not big fans of the Halloween franchise, there's plenty of stuff there. These guys are, you know, the top of the food chain when it comes to filmmaking. But for the people who are fans, you know, the Easter eggs, the nuances, the little subtleties they add, these things are for them, you know, they're for them. And so if you look at who Michael Myers was in 1978, I think he's had 40 years in, you know, in solitary confinement to perfect his art and his mind, man.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's definitely, yeah, he's had time to perfect his craft for sure. And one of the most interesting things for me in Kills is that, you know, we end up finding out that Laurie isn't necessarily Michael's, you know, obsession as she thought he was. And I guess it might be something maybe, like you said, you'd be able to answer like more afterwards. But I was going to ask you, what do you think Michael is truly driven by if Laurie's not really that obsession, like, you know, people thought that she was initially in the 78 film?
Well, I think again, I would not intellectualize the story. I don't normally, if I'm working on a film and I have a great deal of respect for the director and the writers, I'll get to know them, and I want to understand what their psychological, emotional, spiritual connection is to the character, and why the things are going the way they go. David Green and I had our conversations, but we stayed away from all that because I don't need to have any left brain intellectual input into what it is we do. I mean, yes, David will pull me over to the monitor and say, "Hey, Shape, what do you think of this?" Or when he's he's brainstorming, Shape, what do you think of this and this and this? Or I have an idea, he has an idea. I mean, he's very open to ideas and creativity from all around. But that's just a part of the creative aspect of filmmaking. The analytical part, I we'll have this conversation after Halloween Ends is released. I'm sure you and I will have a conversation.
Oh, of course.
You can write down all those questions, and I'll lie to you like a son of a bitch. I won't tell you anything. No, man, I have no idea. But because you know what? I haven't figured it out. I haven't thought about it. And I won't think about it. I don't let myself think about it.
No, that makes sense. That's perfectly understandable. Yeah. I mean, we'll have more of these conversations, James. So don't worry. After that, ends and stuff comes out, we'll revisit, some of these questions like as well. This one, I know you can definitely talk like a little bit more about, just as far as the character of Allison goes, where in the first film, Michael was coming after her. She was really kind of, she kind of thought he was almost like a myth, like, in that first film, heard her grandmother, talking about it, didn't really kind of believe. And then, Michael came after her and she was kind of, on the run. This time around, she lost her father, she almost lost her, grandmother as well. And so she's really on the hunt for Michael Myers, like this time around. So can you just talk a little bit about how your relationship, with Andi has evolved, working on these two films, back to back now, and just what it was like working with her on Kills?
She's amazing. She's an amazing woman. I don't know if many people know this, but she was on a D1 scholarship playing soccer in college. Her father played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. She is, a remarkable athlete, but more importantly, she has the focus and the dedication of an athlete. And she and I have talked about this. I had mentioned to her, and then we had this long conversation about how important it is to buy into a coach's program. Like if you have any possibility of winning a championship, if you have any possibility of having a winning season, you've got to buy into the coach's program. And there are going to be times when you don't necessarily agree with something or you don't understand something. But this is what Andi and I agreed that we did with David Gordon Green. We bought into his program. We bought into what he does. And there are a few things that he did during the choices he made during the filming of Kills. And Andi and I would talk about things. Andi and I have developed a very close friendship. I mean, her husband and her newborn baby, and my life partner Sarah, and we all we've hung out, and we talk often, and we, just like my friendship with Nick, it's a true friendship. We've developed a very, very loving, respectful friendship, and that goes well beyond making movies. So Andi, Andi, and I think Andi's in a unique position. She is not desperate. She's not going to compromise herself to do something that she doesn't believe is right or good. And that's very unusual in our business, especially for someone who's up and coming. I mean, at my stage of the game, I have enough money to live the rest of my life very comfortably. I will choose to work with honor and integrity and honesty. But I have kind of a bafangu attitude for shenanigans, because I don't need it. Yeah. I don't need it. And so it's really refreshing to see someone young and working her way up the star level and up the star ladder, and seeing her have that same attitude. Like, she has such high integrity as a human being, and as an actor. I'm honored to have her as a friend.
I'm really excited to see, just with, like I said, we've kind of been getting the arc, with her character. It's almost seems like they're positioning her to kind of take over, the mantle. Obviously, we'll see kind of what happens, with kills. We're going to have a time jump and things like that. But really excited to see, where things go as far as that goes. But yeah, I know you guys have had, scenes together and stuff, and it's back-to-back films. So I just, yeah, wanted to, see how that has kind of like evolved. And speaking of her character, one of the other deaths that for me, it was probably one of the most brutal, like in the movie for me, was the death of Cameron. And I think just because, and it's interesting too, because Cameron in the first movie in 18, I wasn't, as a character, I wasn't a big fan of, just because, he kind of came off as like a douchebag, the character. And so I
Yeah.
was like, and in this movie, a complete like 180, redeems himself. And it's like, okay, you're actually, like rooting for this character. And you just come along, man, and you were just straight up, well, Michael Myers was just straight up mean to this guy. Like, I mean, smashing his head up and down, and then Allison's down at the bottom of the stairs, and you're walking down, and you're like, oh, you're still alive? You're like bleeding there, sitting on the floor, you're still alive? Let me just go ahead and twist your head around while Allison's like right there. So can you just kind of talk about, filming like that whole scene, and, that death sequence, and just like how that whole thing came together?
Well, that is just like Bob in Bob and Rianne in the bathroom scene in 2018. This really, I think, is a testament to how dedicated Dylan, who played Cameron, is. A remarkably talented actor, remarkably talented. I mean, and a great guy. Oh my God. So he had a stunt double, and we do the work, and the thing is guys, like, I'm an actor stunt man, and so stunt men are used to, stunt women are used to really taking a beating, but we also know how to absorb hits. We know how to use our bodies in ways that minimize the damage that because anything that goes to a body in a fight or a stunt is real. I mean, when you have a head hit, like if I'm going to punch you in the head, I reach back, I throw a punch, I could be 5 feet away from you, but if the camera's behind you and you snap your head, it looks like I just knocked the crap out of you. The body's a whole different ballgame. You've got to go hard to the body. So if you're going to ram somebody against the wall or slam buddy, or punch or kick, it's got to be hardcore. And man, Dylan playing Cameron was just 100% all in, man. He was just like, give it to me, baby. Like he's just, and it was brutal. I mean, I beat that poor boy to death, literally, I beat him hard, man. And again, all controlled, all safe, but he took a beating. And I think, I think for the, I think I'd like to think I did that for all the men who've been abused, all the women who have been abused, and all the men who have abused them. I think I'm doing that. I'd like to say that, from my personal point of view, for every douchebag, whoever, mistreated a woman, this one's for you, dude.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely, for sure, watching that, and I think that was one of the things with Halloween Kills too, is that this was, at least for me, this was one of the first times like in the franchise, and I've seen like all the films, but with just like how brutal you were, in this movie, there was like, his sequence, there was other sequences like in the film where I was actually nervous, seeing like Michael, but just because of like, I was afraid of like what you were going to do to the next person that showed up on screen that walked in your path. So I was almost, just nervous because of how like the level of the brutality. So I think, you guys, as far as like that goes, creating the tension throughout the film, and then just being able to take these characters that maybe didn't have as much screen time, or they were, viewed one way in like the previous film, and being able to turn them around and, give more screen time to these characters, and just, make you care for them when they were kind of a jerk in the first one, was just amazing storytelling.
Well, I mean, again, that goes back to David. It all starts at the top, and David's understanding of the human condition. I mean, he is such, pardon me, he's such an empath, and David will tell you, like, if you're feeling it, he's feeling it too. He's just so empathic. He has such a great understanding of the human condition, and So, and he's just such a high creative, you know what I mean? I mean, the guy doesn't sleep. He's always working on something, you know, and he has such high integrity, you know what I mean? And he cares about humanity. And so I think, you know, and he and David and the whole team as comedic writers, comedians definitely, I think, more than any other art form, have a deeper understanding of the human condition, because there is no comedy without irony, and there is no irony without the human condition being what it is, which is basically full of shit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And something that I wanted to, so I don't know if this will kind of fall into that category, James. If it is, you know, we could always, you know, we'll follow up on it. But as far as, so not only do you dish out a lot of, you know, brutality like in this film as Michael Myers, but I mean, you, as you kind of mentioned, you were on the receiving end of, you know, of quite a bit of that, like as well throughout the film. You know, Michael definitely took a lot of, you know, big hits to him. In your opinion, by the events at the end of Halloween Kills, do you think Michael Myers is still, you know, 100% human, or do you think he definitely has like a supernatural element to him?
I actually, in spite of the fact that I don't want to intellectualize, an opinion of that has actually risen within me because of the natural through line of where we're going in Halloween Ends. I can't speak to it because a lot of that has to do with what David and Danny have written.
What happens? Okay.
Yeah, what happens from this point forward. And and again, it's like, I would say, as much as I trust David Gordon Green, I would tell the audience, trust David Gordon Green. Trust him, because this man and his team, you know, and Danny and the vision that not only he creates. I mean, you know, there are a lot of people who are involved in this, you know, that weigh in, even though Danny and David create. I mean, Malika Akkad and Ryan Freeman at Trancas, right? They will definitely be weighing in on these screenplays. And Ryan Turek, who is another great friend, and you know, Ryan Freeman's a great friend, Malik's a great friend. These are all, we've all become friends, not just friends in the business sense, like, oh, good to see you, and then you're gone, you know, but people we know we're going to keep knowing for years and years and years. We've stayed in touch in between. So, you know, the insight that Malik and Ryan Freeman have is based on years and years of work. Ryan Turek at Blumhouse pulled this thing together. I mean, he's a pretty incredible guy, and a really, really knowledgeable human being with horror in general and the Halloween franchise in particular. So when they're developing this trilogy, you know, these guys are all, you know, there's input from those angles. And then Michael Simmons, one of the most gifted cinematographers I've ever had the, you know, good fortune to work with, his input, of course, because then understand the visual nature and how lighting affects the, you know, the story they want to tell. So I would say, you know, trust these guys. I mean, because so far, these people, you know, these guys that I've been so blessed to work with and to know and to call friends now, they, and Jamie as well, because Jamie's on the product, you know, she's a producer. She's also weighing in on the stories, of course, and no one has to convince anybody of how, you know, profoundly gifted she is. You know, so trust what these guys are putting together and where it's going to go. And I think that's a very valid and important question. And I think it will be answered for you.
Okay. Yeah. So I was gonna say I had a feeling that might be the case. So we'll have to wait to find out that answer for at least a little while longer.
Yeah, until next October.
Yeah. And now, as far as I actually wanted to, because I remember asking you about it briefly, and you couldn't go into much detail before because, you know, obviously the film hadn't come out. So just now with, you know, Kills like being out, you know, just like you as James Jude Courtney, what is your view, or what did you think of the aspect of the film that tackled like the mob mentality? Because I thought that was a really cool aspect that they, you know, they covered in this film. Just like, you know, they've never really explored that in Halloween before. Like you had that, you know, that small scene in like in 4 with like the hillbillies like going after like Michael Myers, and you had that small little group. But this was literally the whole town and how different people were affected. and then, with Michael Myers showing back up, how they react. And I believe, if I get this wrong, don't kill me, guys, but I thought it was like Brackett or someone said that, he's turning us into monsters, or something along that line, when people were going after the mental patient and stuff like that. So just what are your thoughts on, like, the them covering like the mob mentality in this film?
Well, I would say, think about this. This film would have come out in October of 2020. So that would have been a few months before January 6th.
Yep.
So it's kind of interesting that there would be the prescience of, of David Gordon Green and Danny McBride and the whole team putting together a film that's dealing with mob mentality, when we begin to see, what happens with mob mentality. And mob mentality is ubiquitous in the history of our country and of the world. And generally speaking, mob mentality does not make wise decisions. And oftentimes the people who are involved in those mobs deeply regret what they did, because they got swept up in the emotion of it all and didn't act the way they normally would act, or make the decisions they would normally make. And I think David Gordon Green touched on that, beautifully. There are some people who say they don't want to hear it, they don't want to know anything about social comment, or they don't want this or they want that in the movie. Well, it's David's movie. He gets to make the movie he wants. If you want to make a movie that doesn't have social content in it, make your own movie. That's all I got to say about that, man. Yeah. It's David's movie. He gets to make the movie he wants to make. And I think it's just really, I don't know how he was able to see into the future, or if he did see in the future. But I think he approached something that we as human beings need to deal with, regardless of any, pointing at any point in history and time and any particular action taken by any particular mob. I think we need to look at that and go, mob mentality doesn't work. And that was his little comment. But if you look at any good film, there's always comments on who we are as human beings. And if it's a good film, there's also the opportunity to look at that and go, ooh, if I were in that situation, I could make a better choice. Or I was in that situation and I wish I had made a better choice.
Exactly.
So, films can be instructive. I mean, there's so much goodness and so much we can learn in films. And I think horror films, in particular, offer ample opportunity for that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to kind of like follow up on that, I was just going to say that horror is definitely not a genre that shies away necessarily from like social commentary. That's been something that horror films have been doing for years and years. I mean, go back, the first one that comes to my mind is the original Night of the Living Dead, George A. Romero's like film. But just throughout history, horror seems to bring that up, those kind of issues. They might not be necessarily like, right in your face, like beating you over the head with a certain like message, but there's a lot of films that have those, those messages like in there if you're, really looking for them. And I think that's, a great opportunity to kind of like look at ourselves too, and kind of, go from there, like as human beings. So yeah, it's in all kind of movies. It's not just like because someone just like wants to like put it in there or whatever.
Yeah, and a guy like David is not trying to, he's not trying to shove his opinion down anybody's throat. But again, it's his movie.
Yeah,
it's his story. He gets to make the movie he wants to make. And I encourage anybody who wants to make a different kind of movie, make it, man. Make it. Yeah. It's not easy, but make it. Do it.
And we'll start wrapping things up here, James. But as far as obviously, as the title of the movie says, there's, and we've talked about it a lot in this interview, there's a lot of killing going on. Looking at, the film, what was probably like your favorite death scene to film in Halloween Kills?
Well, man, I mean, because to shoot was the mob scene, because that was days of work. It was absolutely brutal. One of the things I pride myself in is hitting marks, especially very difficult marks. And when you're fighting multiple people, you have to be in very specific places at very specific times. Otherwise, people get injured. And for instance, like, when I took the 3 bullet hits into the shoulder, boom, boom, boom. All I did was walk back to Paul, the camera operator, who, by the way, is a brilliant director of photography himself. I said, Paul, where do you need my head? And he gave me a spot, and then I paced it off. I walked away, and they shot me, boom, boom, boom. My head hit exactly where he wanted it. I'm good at that. And so that gives me tremendous pleasure knowing that people can count on me when, because those things are so critical. But as far as my favorite kill scene, that's a Cameron scene, dude. I mean, there's just nothing. I mean, that was balletic,
Oh yeah. No, like I said, it was one of my favorite scenes as well, just with the fact that so much like went into that scene, but just like I said, how brutal you were to that poor kid. Like I was just like, oh my God. Like there was times in the movie where I was like almost like wincing like a little bit.
Yeah.
Just with like how brutal you were. And I mean, some of the other ones that just like quickly like come to my mind. The one with God, I'm spacing on her name, but she was dressed up as the nurse, where she goes to like shoot you, and you kick open the door and the gun turns around and like shoots her. I was like, that is some straight up like John Wick shit, like right there, like kicking the door and it turning.
Yeah, a couple of fans have come up to me and gone, wow, this is like Michael Myers meets John Wick. And I'm like, but it was a natural progression. It needed to go there. And David and Danny and Ryan Turek and Ryan Freeman and Malcolm Cod and, everybody involved, they knew it needed to go there. Like, there's a consensus when we were all working together. And they brought the right stunt coordinator in, Aaron Armstrong, who, by the way, plays the Shape in 1978. And it's interesting. Attila told me, the first AD, one of the producers, first assistant director, told me, if I'm getting the story straight, he told me they looked at over 200 people to find someone to play the young character.
Yep.
But they couldn't find anybody that moved the way I move. And Aaron, interestingly enough, has practiced decades of Aikido in addition to Kung Fu and other arts. I have practiced, in addition to other martial arts, a lot of Kali combined with Aikido, or I should say Aikido with Kali. So Aikido, like in Aikido, you don't lift your feet up and move. There's no kicks. It's all very, if you know the whirling dervishes, the Sufi whirling dervishes, it's very smooth and circular. You don't see movement. You don't telegraph movement. So when I sat down and talked to Aaron about how to move and how I moved and where it came from, it comes from the hara. The hara is 2 inches below your belly button. And if you move from the hara, you're going to move differently than if you move from your head or your heart or your, any other part of your body. And if you look at people walk with they lead with their head, they lead with their heart, they lead with their groin, but very few people walk from their hara. And when you walk from your hara, you have to glide. That's what you do. And so, it was pretty awesome that first of all, Aaron came in as a stunt coordinator because he was the best guy for the job to do the kind of fighting we did. And he was also the best guy for the job to play the 1978 Shape. He killed it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say, as far as that goes, I couldn't believe, like when we saw the flashback sequence too, I just couldn't believe, like it looked like I was watching something straight out of like the 1978 film. I was like, holy shit, like this is amazing. I want to see, it would be cool to see if maybe not even necessarily like Halloween, but just other films, if they could capture that aesthetic, because that was just such a treat being a Halloween fan, just the way everything was like lit, just the way it was filmed, the way he was able to, walk as like Michael Myers. That was definitely, another one of the highlights in the film for sure.
Yeah. Well, he'll be doing conventions. So if your fans want to come out and meet him, he's an amazing human being, a humble, gentle, badass martial artist. and I what I see for Aaron is someday he'll be directing. And he'll be a good director.
That's super cool. And to wrap things up, James, I mean, as far as just, working on this film, we've been sitting on this thing, we had to wait another year just because like the pandemic. So it's one of those weird cases where you know, we were supposed to see this movie like a year before, so we kind of got to sit with it for another extra year. What are just some of your favorite things or just memories from, you know, like working on, you know, Halloween Kills now that it's out, you know, in theaters and everyone's, you know, been able to get to it, like experience themselves?
You know, man, working on both these films has been the highlight of my career. If I ended my career, which I'm certainly not going to, but if I ended my career with these two films, it would hands down be the highlight. I mean, every single department, you know, script supervisor, and yeah, I mean, let's go into every single department was populated by the most talented, most humble, um, we people in the business, and we had such a incredible feeling of family. We have such an incredible feeling of family, and it's so you know, the producer suite. I rarely have. I've worked on lots of films. I don't get together with the producer suite. You know, Sean Gowrie, Laura Alton, Rick Osaka, Jason Salzman. Those guys, they're my friends. And it's, you know, when and I'm living on the East Coast now, so when I get to LA, those four people are some of the people that I have dinner with. You know, Christopher Nelson. I mean, the experiences I had with him, because, you know, I've played in a band, he played in a band. We both have very similar musical influences. So he would look at the script for the next day. He'd look at the sides at the call sheet, and he would decide what music he was going to play. And that to me was a super highlight, because I'd show up in his trailer at 6 a.m. or 6 p.m., whatever it was. And I'd sit in the chair and he'd start cranking an album. It could be the Ramones, it could be blues, it could be David Bowie, it could be anything, you know, it could be Taj Mahal. I mean, who knows what it was going to be, but it was always something that he knew was going to put me in the mood to do exactly what it was I was going to do that day. So I would say those highlights. I mean, I'm going to be friends with these people for a very long time, and it goes well beyond business. And that just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. We're such gypsies, you know, with such a transient business. We love each other, and then we move on, you know. And if we see each other 5 years later in another film, cool. But these people are different.
And that's so cool, man. And just, yeah, being able to meet people and have that, you know, connection with them. So I mean, that's awesome. And James, again, you know, congratulations again, you know, to you, the rest of the crew, everyone who worked on this, you know, on again another successful Halloween film. Can't wait for Halloween Ends. And I know, you know, you're gonna be actually at Rhode Island Comic Con coming up, because I'm gonna be there. So I'm definitely gonna, you know, see you there as well. So if any of you fans watching out there, if you're in the area, definitely, you know, make it a point to go up and see James at his table. I know you've been doing like a bunch of other cons too. So is there anywhere else fans can, you know, can look for you coming up, James?
This may be it for the year. It may be it. I'm preparing, I'm training hard for Halloween Ends, and physically training, which means I'm dieting. I'm training really hard. And I mean, the physical demands of this role are far greater than you know, a person who's never done this before would understand. I mean, for every blow I took, you know, for every baseball bat in the back that you see on the screen, I probably took 80 to 100, 120 shots. Every kick in the ribs that you see, again, 80, 100, you know. So the physical demands of doing this role are far greater than most people would understand. So I'm training now. So I don't think there may be another con after that. If so, I'll let you know. But right now, I'm going to, you know, I haven't spent more than a day or two at home for the last several months. So I mean, I'll be gone for weeks, spend a couple of days, get back on a plane, and I'm gone. And I'm living in hotels, and so it's going to be nice to be here at home, train hard, eat well, meditate, swim, and then be ready for Halloween Ends in January, because we're going to rock and roll.
I was saying, and then just get ready to do it all again.
Yeah, only better.
Well,
yeah, thanks so much, man. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, James, thank you again. You know, it's always great having you on the show. Like I said, you know, obviously we'll talk more in the future, you know, again, as we get closer to ends, after ends. So thank you again for doing this.
Oh, absolutely, man. Next time, buddy.